Good morning, everybody. So today we are going to be talking about false memories. And this is a really interesting topic because, as I've mentioned before, either in lecture together or in a different screencast, most people think that your memories are very similar to like a video recording that you can play back with near perfect accuracy. And that's not the case. Our memories are much more like a Google Doc that can be edited by multiple people, or a Wikipedia page that can be edited by multiple people. So most of the memories that we have at least some elements to them that are probably not accurate, that are false. And anytime we talk about false memories, we have to kind of discuss like what the implications of, the ability to create false memories, or, the problem with recalling something if it's not correct, and all of those things. So this screencast will be relatively short. We're just going to be talking through some of the facts related to false memories and some of the work of Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, who is probably the most famous psychologist to ever work in the field of false memories. So, the fancy term for a false memory is a confabulation. So you will often hear somebody talk about a confabulated memory. That would be a memory that has at least some elements to it that are fake. So any confabulation is a memory in which there's a distortion of what actually happened, which is, again, something all of us experience, that we have some level of memory distortion happening. But in some cases, the confabulation can be a complete falsehood. It can be totally made up, totally fake. We have a lot of evidence that it is possible to implant false memories in people and to make them believe something happened that didn't happen. And it is even easier to just, kind of mildly distort memories here and there, which can be very problematic when we get into the world of eyewitness testimony, which is really where a lot of Dr. Loftus's work is. Okay, so when we talk about memory construction, every time we retrieve a memory and we retell it, there is the potential to alter pieces of that memory. And that distortion can come from a lot of different places. It can come from, wanting to remember something differently than how it happened. It can come from, telling a story along with your friend and your friend kind of jumping in and saying, that's not how it happened like this. It can come from, maybe initially like exaggerating the truth a little bit, and then over time, like kind of coming to believe the exaggerated truth over what actually happened. So there's a lot of different ways that we can alter our memory. And I know it says we sometimes alter our memories. I would argue that it's a lot more frequent than sometimes. The types of things that we will use to alter our memories, like we've talked about, are your expectations, your schemas, your experiences. So, what you expected to happen, what you wanted to happen, what you thought might happen, what is my previous experience in a similar situation, stuff like that. And also, your environmental surroundings can alter your memories. So, for example, if we're specifically talking about eyewitness testimony and we're talking about, witnessing a crime, if you, witness something happen along with, 5 other people, as everybody is kind of recounting what they thought happened and what they think, kind of went down, those environmental surroundings and what they're saying can kind of distort your memory as it's being encoded as well. And in that way, it's very, very easy to incorporate like misleading or incorrect information into one's memory. And sometimes it can be even just, the way something is worded. So Dr. Loftus, when you watch this TED Talk here in a second, she talks through some of her research. But one of the experiments that they do in implanting false memories is that they will show 2 groups of people the same footage of a car accident. And in and then everybody will go away for 2 weeks, and then they will come back and they will be asked to remember facts about the car accident. And one group will be asked a question that says something like, how fast was the car going when it bumped into the tree? And the other group will be asked a similar question, but it'll say, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the tree? And something as, innocent and small as changing the verb from bumped to smashed, we then have evidence that changes people's answers. The group that heard that the car bumped into the tree will often remember the car as having gone slower than the group that received the more kind of violent verb, the smashed verb. They will remember the car as having gone faster, even though they both saw the same footage. And, in some cases they'll say things like, in one group they will ask questions like, how fast was the car going when it passed the red barn? And then a couple weeks later, when the group comes back, they'll ask, was there a red barn in the movie? And the person will say yes, when in reality there wasn't. What we did was we incorporated that misleading information into the question. And because we put that misleading information into the question, the person encoded information that was false, that wasn't, accurate to the video. So memory is a really tricky thing, especially when we get into the world of, witnessing something that was kind of intense or something that happens very quickly, where you're then kind of asked to have somewhat perfect recall of that event. So like I said, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus is, one of the most famous psychologists of the 20th and 21st century. And that is because she is the first person who is able to show that it is completely possible to implant totally false memories into somebody's mind. So not just distorting memories like what I just mentioned with the bumped versus the smashed verb, but completely implanting a false memory that did not exist before. And through her research, she also kind of showed that it was relatively easy to do so, that it wasn't particularly hard to get people to remember things that didn't happen. And, her career has then been spent kind of speaking out against eyewitness testimony and speaking out against, some of these forms of prosecution that we have that she believes are based on, such a flimsy platform, right? That if memories can be so easily distorted or created, then why are we using that as sort of the end all be all for convicting somebody, especially of like a very serious crime like rape or murder or something like that? So that is a picture of Dr. Loftus. The TED Talk you are going to be watching today is Dr. Loftus kind of going through her work and talking about some of the experiences that she had. So again, she's incredibly famous, not only for, showing that it's possible to implant false memories, but she's really famous in the world of criminal justice, working against eyewitness testimony, proving that it's unreliable. She's been called to testify in a variety of court cases, and she talks about a few of them. And you'll see that in the TED Talk, but she is a very famous modern psychologist. So a few of the things that she highlights when we talk about, okay, well, why are eyewitness testimonies so wrong? And the number one reason is because memory is reconstructive. And what we mean by that is what I mentioned at the beginning of this screencast and what we've talked about in the past. Our memory does not act as a video recording that perfectly encodes the event as it happened. Every time we recall the memory, we are reconstructing what we believe happened. And every time we do that, we can shape it based on our current experiences and schemas and expectations. And every single time you can reconstruct it just a little bit differently than you did the time before. And over time, especially over months or years, that memory can change pretty drastically. It just does so in very small increments. Also, because Elizabeth Loftus highlighted what she coined as the misinformation effect, which is that ability to change somebody's perception of the event by changing the way that you present information. So the misinformation effect is based on her research with things like the bumped versus smashed verb, that providing a little bit of misinformation in the question that you're asking can change the way a person remembers a situation and can change the way that they, testify about a situation happening. And then the other two are cognitive biases that we have talked about many times in the past. The first one is hindsight bias, so this idea that you already knew what was going to happen before it happened. So if you are an eyewitness, watching something happen and you fall victim to this hindsight bias that you believe that you already knew the outcome, what it does is it makes you very confident that your testimony is as accurate as possible. And it can lead to people really doubling down on wrong information, and, swearing that what they're saying is the truth. That hindsight bias would lead to, overconfidence, this idea that I absolutely know what I saw, and not being willing to accept that, maybe it happened too quickly, or maybe you didn't have the best view of what was going down or something like that. So not being able to acknowledge that there's a chance that you could be wrong about what you saw. And that overconfidence can lead to, again, just being very sure about what you saw, even if it's incorrect. And then finally, we know through Loftus's work that witnesses are very highly suggestible. So if you witness something happen and, you hear other people talking about what they saw, there's a very high probability that their memories are going to distort your own. As we have talked about a couple of times in this video, the idea that, the way a detective or reporter or lawyer asks a question about what you saw can lead to misinformation, can lead to you remembering something incorrectly. So it can be very easy to convince a witness that they saw something that they didn't see, just by the way that they word questions or the way that we suggest what happened. That being said, we know that children are more suggestible than adults. It's, very, very difficult it's very difficult to question children about, what they saw if they witnessed a crime, because you have to be so careful about how you word those questions to make sure that you're getting the most accurate information possible. And then the last two questions here, we are not doing the law school example because it doesn't really work in a remote setting, so you can kind of ignore those last two bullet points. So now you are going to be watching a TED Talk from Elizabeth Loftus discussing her work and discussing some of the things that she's found. There are some questions you will be answering in Google Classroom as you watch. As always, if you need anything from me, don't hesitate to reach out. I will see you all later.